Preparing live stream. Right, it does actually say that we are live. So let me just double check. Wrong one.
Yeah, it's telling me meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Okay, cool. I'll just get it up so that I can see if there's any comments. That we are live. So let me just double check. Wrong one.
Yeah, it's telling me meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Oh, I've got it open somewhere. Here we go. Sorry about that. Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mystic Melting Pot. We're going to say hello to Joanna. Thanks for coming on and coming to say hello to us all.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's very nice to have you. You are over in Guatemala.
That's right.
Did I say it right? I might have.
You did, yeah.
Oh, good. So it's morning over there, and it's here, early afternoon here. So yeah, I just want to sort of carry on the conversation we were just having, really, and start off with perhaps some of your journey, Jo, would be cool. Where would you like to start?
Ooh, where would I like to start? So I guess from what I understand, your intention for these interviews is to really talk about people's awakening. So I guess that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, sure.
So I would say that my awakening probably happened between the age of 20 and 25. I'm now 47, so a good 25 years ago. And I was at university studying media and cultural studies. And this experience really opened up to me how very contrived and controlled and choreographed our social experiences, how our life is really quite carefully manipulated. And up until that point, I had no idea. I really didn't understand how the media worked to curate people's ideas. I didn't understand how much people were manipulated intentionally by certain types of media, films, magazines, newspapers, whatever. I had no idea. And I guess in that respect, I had lived quite a innocent and naive kind of life, just thinking that the way life runs is normal, right? When I got to university, they really kind of pulled the blindfold off and showed us very clearly how much the media is used to influence culture. And that for me was a massive wake-up call. And at about the same time, the 9/11 happened, the Twin Towers came down in New York, and that whole massive global event happened, which then led on to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on and so forth. And so I was at university when all that happened. I remember watching the live screening of, the Twin Towers falling. And then I was offered some information around alternative information, kind of the alternative narrative of what happened there. Information around Building 7 coming down, controlled demolition, all that kind of stuff, the plane hitting the Pentagon.
The BBC being caught out saying that World 7 has fallen and it was in the back
before it had gone down. Yeah, exactly. There were a whole pile of details in there that when you actually started looking at them made no sense at all, unless you looked at it through the lens of, oh, this was pre-planned a long time ago, and it couldn't have possibly been done in the way that they're saying it was done, right? So that got me really thinking, that made me really question. Yeah, it was a mind explosion for sure. And with all of the stuff I was learning at university, which was all about how the global economic system was very heavily controlled and manipulated, how the geopolitical systems were very much manipulated by vested interests and corporate interests and interests that were, let's say, higher or beyond state-based power. Yeah. All of these things were coming into my realm.
Like how they were funded and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. How they're funded and how the people who actually have power and control in our world orchestrate wars, how they, create financial crashes, all of this kind of stuff. So all of this information was filtering through. And then I was watching it playing out in real time through this event of 9/11. And, you know, about 1 million pennies dropped and my head exploded. And at that point, I was like, wow, life is not how I thought it was, right? Yeah, isn't it? So I started going to the demonstrations that were going on, anti-capitalist demonstrations, the June 18th demonstrations, all that kind of stuff in London. And I was young, I was a student, I was like fired up. I just had my social political awakening, and I was angry. I was really angry. I was like, how could you have done this to us, the people? How could you still be doing this to all the people in the world? And I started to understand how the division between first world and third world and all the poverty that happens in the third world, again, was fully orchestrated and choreographed, you know. So all of that information really set me off on a path of, I guess it was a warrior path, really. You know, I got the righteous rage, and I was outraged about how I realized now the world operated. Now, going back a few steps, I had quite a multicultural upbringing. I was born in South Africa. I moved to Scotland when I was 2.5, moved to England when I was 8.5. And so I had this quite diverse and multicultural experience whilst being within the midst of quite a politically difficult scenario in South Africa as well, you know, with the racial conflict there and the political conflict that goes with the racial conflicts in South Africa. And so having all of these very different cultural experiences informing my upbringing as a child also gave me a diverse outlook upon the world. You know, I understood that people worked in different ways, that different cultures have different ways of doing things, different belief systems, different understandings. So that was all underlying that, you know. And when I got to 17, I left home, and there were issues there with my parents. We had very vastly differing opinions and ideas, and they kicked me out of the house. Anyway, I ended up on a whirlwind, crazy ride with a psychopath who sex trafficked me, criminally trafficked me, and then tried to kill me. So I had a 3-year stint from 17 to 20, which was intense. And, you know, it was a massive reality check and wake up call for my pretty naive and innocent little 17-year-old being. And by the time I came out of that, I then had to do a 3-month stint in prison because the man who had trafficked me basically got me involved in his criminal dealings. So I ended up going to jail and doing 3 months in jail. So that whole period of time
in England as well, or
yeah, that was in England. Yeah.
okay.
So that whole period of time was just intense and really damaging for me. I came out of that with extreme PTSD, but that also set me off on a path of healing. And so the next boyfriend that I had after the psychopath who tried to kill me was lovely. And he said to me, I was waking up every single night having nightmares of being chased down the road with a knife, being killed, right? Every night waking up in cold sweats, terrified. Wow. And he said to me, Jo, have you ever heard of Reiki? I think it would be really good for you. So he kind of dropped the seed, you know, planted the seed. I'd never really encountered any forms of spiritual healing or energy healing at that point. And so he gave me a book and he said, read this. I think it would help. So I did. And, you know, what it basically said was that Reiki is this form of energy healing, which works on physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels to heal on all levels. And I read that and I thought, that's exactly what I need, but it sounds too good to be true, really, you know. That sounds like miracles. But I was up for some miracles. I knew I needed the miracles, you know. I knew that I was damaged. I knew that I needed help. But I had also gone through such a really an experience that was filled with shame and guilt and taboo, you know. It was incredibly taboo. And I'm quite a private person generally, so I wasn't up for laying all my stuff out on a table in front of somebody else so that they could tell me how messed up I was, because I knew how messed up I was, right? So, and Reiki you can do yourself. So I went off and I learned how to practice Reiki for myself. And that just was amazing. So I pretty religiously threw myself into that whole world of energy healing. I worked on myself. I learned all through the different levels of Reiki up to teacher level. And within a few years, I was teaching people how to practice Reiki themselves. It was nothing short of life-changing for me. And through that period of time, that was exactly the same time as I was at university, having all of these massive political and social awakenings. And so at the same time, I was having a spiritual awakening as well. I'd always been quite spiritually connected. I'd always been a spiritual seeker. My mum was a Sunday school teacher, so I was brought up as a Christian. But from very early on, I rejected that because it made no sense to me. I didn't just lots of the stories in the Bible didn't make sense. I didn't understand how God could be a wrathful God, if God professed to be loving and caring and creative. There were some paradoxes in there that didn't make sense to me. But I've always felt very connected, strongly connected to spirituality, but I didn't have an answer. So I kind of set off on this journey of searching, which took me through Buddhism and paganism and a lot of earth-based practices and spiritual pathways.
Shamanism, I suppose, is what it brought you to.
Say that again?
It brought you to shamanism, I suppose, in the end.
It did eventually, yeah, it absolutely did. And so as I was at university studying all the social political stuff, I was also in my own time really throwing myself into my spiritual path, my own personal healing journey, and exploring energy healing, really. So Reiki led me to crystal healing and herbalism and plant spirit medicine. And, I was being basically guided. Reiki guided me into these other pathways which resonated with me and which piqued my interest and which helped. Ultimately, I was on a path of personal healing. I could see if I was getting better or not. I could see through my own experiences of my post-traumatic stress symptoms whether it was helping or not. And, all of these things that I was trying in their own way were helping in different ways. So I carried on following the trail.
I suppose you could actually say that in the realms of self-development, that is the shadow work, because you're trying different things to remove the shadow, or as you learn, reintegrate the shadow back into yourself, because you know that it's not actually separate.
Absolutely. I class that period of my life as the journey through the Shadowlands, because it plunged me deep, deep, deep into the darkest abyss I could have possibly imagined. And then my journey was to find my way out back to the light. And that took years, actually. It took years and following a trail, following different clues, using different medicine, natural healing medicine. That was the path. And eventually that path led me to shamanism. And that was just, the foundation of everything. The underlying bedrock of all of these different pieces of the puzzle that I was being given or shown. If I brought it back to shamanism, everything fitted into place. Everything had a place within that map, within that context. Yeah. And so thus began my journey with shamanism, shamanic healing, shamanic ceremony. I did a 3-year apprenticeship in the UK, which was very much based on community healing work and personal healing work, lots of ceremony, lots of sweat lodges, lots of dances as well, and working in community. And then I had a bit of a break with them. There was a bit of a glass ceiling that I was hitting my head against, and it was quite controlled and restricted and formulaic. And I'm a bit of an anarchistic witch, really. I quite like freedom to explore my own journey. And it was just a bit too heavily controlled for me. So I then branched out and went and did training in one-to-one therapeutic shamanism and shamanic healing practice. So working around things like power retrieval, shamanic extraction, soul retrieval, depossession, all of those kind of things. Yeah. And I then trained up in that department to be able to work one-to-one with people. So yeah, that was really my immersion into shamanic work. And I have to say, in terms of the healing of you know, my experiences of this lifetime of going through the trafficking and the violence and the close murder, you know, what I discovered was that shamanic healing had all of the answers, all of the practices, all of the techniques to be able to sort all of that trauma out bit by bit by bit, to piece me back together again, and to actually to make me stronger than I had been before. You know, so the journey of healing for a while was about rebuilding and fixing something that was broken. But once all of that was done, then it became about strengthening and becoming sovereign. You know, and so this is where we enter the conversation around sovereignty. And I know that's very much a topic at your core focus and heart. And for me, that sovereignty is really about spiritual sovereignty, less about the legal stuff, much more about the spiritual sovereignty. So I work to help people now to reclaim their own sovereignty by reclaiming their personal power, their vital essence, the life force for themselves, and their soul force as well. And by cutting the bonds, the energetic bonds that restrict us in spiritual and energetic ways, and that have done for our ancestors as well, you know, so it's working into ancestral lines, clearing all that stuff through the ancestral lines, clearing the shadows and the patterns and the trauma from the ancestors, and working on karmic lines too. So all the times our souls have been incarnate in other bodies, you know, that's kind of where I've got to it now, less about this lifetime. I've kind of done the work on this lifetime. And then I realized that actually it ripples back a long way. And so that's the current focus, really. Yeah. So there you go. That's my short bullet point journey of awakening.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Wow, what a journey. For me, I found like this last 8 years for me has been, I'll share a little bit of some.
Yeah, please do.
This last 8 years I've been healing and on this journey where you've been. And I haven't quite fully learned all of the shamanism, but I've had it told to me many times that I've been a shaman in many lifetimes. So I have this thing about not wanting certificates. I like to learn things, but I like to know that I've taught myself it, or I've I've embraced the teachings, but then I'll possibly make them my own, or integrate them into something else, because that's what I like to do. But yeah, everything that's happened for me has been a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And when it comes to the system and sovereignty, it's a case of we're not taught. So natural law is kind of inherent. You know right from wrong. There are a few obviously lessons you need to learn for that, because when you're young, you'll make a mistake and make the wrong decision. But morality is kind of in natural law that you don't need to be taught it. It's very apparent. We're not taught to look at ourselves when we're young. And if we look too deeply at ourselves, with, you know, that's selfish, or that's, you know, or you must care about others too much. And whilst I do care about others, it's like, no, actually, this is all within. Everything's become all within. It's all within my reality and my control under my spiritual sovereignty. I create what I want to create. I dismiss what I want to dismiss. It's all a choice. The school indoctrination and programming, along with the media and everything else, it's just one complete system of slavery, and that's what it's been for thousands of years. And the stuff I share from the foundation is the fact that I had all of this stuff going on. So 2015, I had my kind of big spiritual awakening, and I say that just because it was a big shift. But actually, like you, it's like, actually, hang on, I've always had this awareness. I just didn't know that's what it was called. It's just been given a label, that's all. From that point, I kind of had so much thrown at me at once. I left my family because we fell out. I woke up to all the corruption in the world and what was going on. And then I had the spiritual stuff all at the same time. And I was just like, oh my word, like, give me a break. Just like, wow. So yeah, we've been on this journey, and I've been ignoring I've been ignoring my destiny, or where I should be going with all of this, because I just wasn't ready. And now I am, and I'm here to ground this community into the realm, because it's time that we all step forward as custodians of the earth and actually restore everything. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are being called up at the time, at this time. You know, I think we're living in extraordinary times, and the contracts, I believe that the contracts our souls made when we came into this lifetime, into this body, are kind of ringing their alarm bells now, saying, actually, you made a deal that you came here for this, and this is what you need to do. You know, and I think a lot of people are hearing those alarm bells, and some people are like, oh, make the noise stop, stop, stop. No, I just want to get on with normal life.
Louder and louder and louder.
Yeah. And, you know, you can't ignore them, because if they, you know, if your soul is calling you up, you're going to have to do it. That's what's happening, isn't it?
Hey, I was kicked off a ladder 4 weeks ago. Literally kicked off a freaking ladder, and I'm like, what? Okay, all right, I'll give in. Jeez.
Yeah, the universe has sneaky ways of making you do what you're supposed to do.
It's like a decision I would have never made, especially in the wet. And looking back on it, it was just like that would have never happened. So it's definitely the biggest sign I could ever have. Like, come on, you're not listening. Get on with it.
Yeah.
I'm here. Yeah, it's been a long journey, I feel. And do you know what? I think it's actually to do with the technology. Um, there's a certain set of vibrations that is apathy, and you know, in the lower vibration of consciousness, and to keep us in apathy, to keep us procrastinated, to keep us distracted, because everything is a distraction. This true embodiment, I believe, couldn't have happened before this time. Certain things had to happen because certain people needed to be uncomfortable, especially with COVID, because it was like, but then it happened, and it was like, hang on, we told you it was going to happen like this, or a version of it. And yeah, I do believe that there is a divine plan at play, really. And like you say, we're all being put into the right place.
Yeah. Yeah. When COVID happened in 2020, there was a global meditation on the 1st of April. You know, I think a lot of people who were already a bit switched on at that point realized that a big thing was happening, and there was a big coming together for this global meditation to try and assist, ease, dispel whatever this dark thing that was kind of looming over us. And at that point in time, I wanted to join in, but I'm not really a meditator. That's not really my path. And so I did a shamanic journey. And whenever I do shamanic journeys for my clients, I always voice record it, right? And I send them the voice recording so that they can hear what's coming up in real time. And I narrate the whole thing. Wow. So I'll be like, oh, I can see this or I can see that. And they're telling me this, whatever, right? I'm blindfolded, so I can see better. Yeah. Anyway, so I decided to do that as my contribution to this global meditation. So I did a shamanic journey, and what came through was basically very powerful. It was an angelic transmission where angels were coming forward to essentially cut the bonds of slavery of the contracts, the soul contracts, which bind humanity into serving dark agendas. Okay, that's what came through. And wow. So I put that out as like a free transmission in April 2020. And then it was like somebody opened the floodgates. My own intuition just ramped up massively in the next few months. The information that was coming through was crystal clear. I was getting such strong, powerful body sensations and experiences while I was doing the channeling. Wow. And what flooded out was what I then called the Gaia transmissions. Yeah. And the Gaia transmissions has become a collection of shamanic healing transmissions that people can listen to. And as I was kind of channeling each one, again, it was pieces of the puzzle, you know, it's like each one was slightly focused on a different aspect of healing, but also a different aspect of how we as humans have been spiritually enslaved. And each transmission built upon the previous one, and all of them as a whole collection. By the time I got to kind of 20 or 30, I was like, oh, I understand what this is about now, you know, because I could see the overview, and it was all about casting off the shackles of slavery and making the choice to be free. You know, that was the underlying premise of the entire thing. And so the Gaia transmissions is still ongoing. I think the published release ones are up to about 46, but I've got another 10 or 15 that I haven't edited yet.
I think I'm up to number 4, so I've been making a conscious effort to have some nice me time and properly lay on the bed and sit and chill and listen to it, and it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, well, you know, they some of them are absolutely kick-ass. And as I was channeling them, I was like, "Ooh, this is strong stuff, you know, strong stuff." And so that's kind of they've been around for 4 years, and I've been kind of I'd monetized them, so I had a membership, but it wasn't that like busy. And I kept on being told it's not time for them yet. It's not time. You know, that the people aren't ready. There were a handful of people that were ready for them,
Sure.
but most people weren't ready. And so they kept my guides kept on saying to me, just wait, just wait. And then this year they said to me, now release them and put them on YouTube for free. I was like, okay then.
Okay.
And it's the year of the dragon, and I'm a dragon. I'm a fire dragon, a Chinese fire dragon. So they were like, yeah, give the world a bit of fire dragon, you know, energy. So I've been releasing those onto YouTube one a week since February, since the beginning of the year of the dragon. And that's kind of, yeah, my gift really to humanity. For I know that the powers that be are trying, they've put the thumb screws on, you know, they've put the yoke on, they're squeezing people harder and harder and harder, trying to break people, you know, and it's working, unfortunately. It's really, really working. And I know that a lot of people are financially pressed at the minute as well. So, you know, this is my gift to try and give people the opportunity to unbind themselves and to step into power and to make the choice of freedom rather than being enforced into slavery. So, yeah, the Gaia transmissions is my current kind of gift to humanity to try and assist that process through. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And we shall put some links in the description at the end of the clip. Yeah, it's like you said, people just weren't ready for it. And I think it was because of the shock of lockdowns. So like I've been a window cleaner for a little while, and I didn't stop. I didn't pay any attention to anything that was anywhere because I don't really watch the news. I still watch the occasional film because I want to see what they're trying to subliminally program everyone with, but I don't tend to watch daily. You know, I might walk past a newspaper stand and have a good chuckle at some of the headlines and then carry walking on because that's all that means to me now. I don't live in that world anymore. And I think that's one of the things about coming back to your own sovereignty is it's a choice which reality you choose to live in. And I suppose where I found spirituality got it wrong a little bit was, especially when I first kind of started going to different circles and getting into it, was the new age kind of spirituality and all of these kind of things that were like, well, hang on a minute, this just seems about making money. This is just, you're not actually helping people. You're not, I all understand that we all have to live and we all have to operate in this bullshit system where money exists. I get that, but it's just like, there was just so many sort of, it didn't seem to be any genuine people that I could actually talk to or relate to. I used to go and have readings with people just to try and connect with someone. I didn't care really about what you were telling me because I was trying to connect with them and I was just like, they're not really into it. Like, okay, fine. I just found quite a few charlatans really, and it kind of switched me off from it all for a while. And there is a bit of a story where I kind of opened my third eye and I saw a lot of demons around my local area and within people and animals and everywhere. And it was quite apparent that this whole system, this system of slavery over the years, over the thousands of years, is this kind of energy sucking, living, breathing, inorganic thing that just consumes everything. And it is very demonic, and it likes to feed. And that fear and what they perpetuate in the media is what they like to feed on. So it's just like, so when that happened, I kind of closed it down because I was like, well, that's far too much for me right now. I can't handle that. And then had my daughter came along and she initiated me in quite a horrendous way. And I'm not going to divulge that today, but yeah, it's a funny old world.
It is, you know, and to touch on the demonic aspect of it, I would absolutely agree with all of that. And it's an aspect of my work that has become more and more at the forefront. I would say in the last 10 years, five to 10 years for me. You know, I'd never particularly believed or disbelieved in demons. I'd stepped away from Christian doctrine and dogma a long time ago. And I've never really just bought into any spiritual path or rejected it without, you know, I kind of put things through my own filter of what makes sense to me and what I experience directly, which is why I like shamanism so much, because it's the path of direct revelation. There is no middleman. There is no, you know, middle person that you have to, that interprets things for you. You get your information directly from spirit, right? Or from the earth. And so for me, I didn't really know anything or have any particular opinions on demons or demonic infestation, excuse me, until I was asked to do a piece of work for somebody. And somebody that I know approached me and asked me if I would do some healing work for their partner who had been committed into a psychiatric institution. And so I'd never done any work in the mental health department either. You know, a lot of my work early on in my shamanic practice was very much based around violence and abuse of women, because that was the path that I'd come through. And so that was the genre, if you like, of the majority of my client base. So it was a bit of a departure for me to start working into the mental health avenue. And when I did the shamanic healing work for this particular man who was committed into a mental institution, what the woman, his partner, had told me, she had said to me that he believed he was evil. That was part of his psychosis, that he believed he was evil. And when I journeyed on this, what I discovered was that he had made contracts, soul contracts to evil in other lifetimes. And so he was bound into this servitude to evil. So it wasn't that he was evil, it was that he was serving evil. And he didn't really know that, you know, because this was a contract that had been made in another lifetime. So, and I was shown in that journey very clearly an entity who had curly horns. You know, it wasn't kind of like the classic little devil horns like that. They were curly, like an animal skull. I was shown an animal skull that had curly horns. And this is the image that my guides use for me consistently now whenever I'm dealing with anything demonic, right? But that was the first time. I'd never encountered it before that. So it was through my direct work experience that I started encountering these contracts with evil, and then actual entities of evil who presented themselves with curly horns, right? And so then I started thinking, there's something behind this, isn't there? Like, you know, this big archetypal story that we are told in so many different narratives of the battle between good and evil started showing itself to me through my work. And then it was like the floodgates opened. It was like every other client that I had was infested with demons. It was like, oh my God, what's happening here? You know? Yeah. And I was having to face some dark beings in my treatment room and, you know, face off against evil on a regular basis. And so I kind of discovered through this process a whole range of techniques and tactics in how to deal with this. And what I discovered, I think this is what I really want to share with people, because this is the good news. This is the good part of the story, right? Is that 99% of the demons that are infesting people on this earth, I believe, through my experience of working with them and dealing with them and having long conversations with them, right? I've had a lot of conversations with demons, is that 95 to 99% of them are just dead humans, right? They are people, human beings who have died and have not transitioned over to the light because of their own pain, trauma, and shadow stories. And so when they died, they got caught in the limbo land between life and light. And then they were hijacked and enslaved to serve dark agendas. Now, it could be that they already had soul contracts underlying when they were alive, where they were in service to darkness. And I want to make clear that a lot of these contracts, some of them are made willingly and consciously, but the vast majority are done through trickery and deception. And the dark side loves a bit of trickery and deception. They revel in it. They take pride in it, in fact. They laugh about it. They laugh how they manage to convince people into their agenda through trickery and deception. Excuse me. And so
especially
the vast majority,
when they like to put it back on us and take the piss as well. They do that too.
yes, of course,
because that's all part of the kick.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And they love it. They love it. They absolutely take pride in it. If they can trick people into their own demise, so much the better. But the vast majority of the demons who are actually inhabiting people's energy fields and bodies are dead, enslaved humans. They're not demons. They're just dead people, dead spirits, spirits of dead people who have been enslaved as well to dark agendas. And so when I deal with demons, and I'm going to put that in inverted commas now because they're not really demons, when I deal with them, I have a set protocol to liberate them, because actually they need help too. And this is the place that I've come to with all of this healing work, is understanding that they're not the enemy. Actually, we can get them onto our side and help them. And then that's one less foot soldier for darkness working against us. And so in my work, I help them and I go and rescue me and my allies. We do the work to go and rescue their souls, because their souls have been stolen and are being held against their will. They're enslaved, right? So we go and rescue their souls. We bring them back. We give them back to the demon. We then cut all of the soul contracts. We cancel the soul contracts that bind them to serve darkness so that they're free. We then call upon their ancestors, because a lot of the time these beings are mind wiped, they're memory wiped. They don't remember that they were human. And so we then bring their ancestors in. We bring their loving and compassionate light ancestors in and surround them, and so that they remember that they were human, because very often they believe themselves to be demons because they've been indoctrinated in the spirit realms and told that they're evil and that they're dark and that they are demons. That's what they believe.
And so we have to embodying that because that's all they know.
Exactly, exactly. And so we have to remind them that actually they're humans, and actually that their right as a spiritual being is to be in the light and to receive love as well. A lot of these beings, I'll say to them, do you want to experience love? And they're like, I don't deserve love. They'll scream it. I don't deserve love. We don't have love here, right? And then we'll just bring the ancestors in, which is that's my sneaky little ace up my sleeve. We call in the ancestors and we're like, can you feel the love that they have for you? This was your mother, your grandmother, your father, your grandfather. And at that point, they melt. They just melt. And the demon sort of guise falls off them. And people who can see spirits, I can't see them. I speak to them and I can hear them, but I can't see them. But I've worked with people who can see spirits. And at that point, they'll say to me, oh my God, they're a human underneath. And I'm like, yeah, they are.
So
and the horns fall off.
Do you do that whilst you're journeying then?
Yeah.
All of that, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
And at that point, we cross them over to the light. We're like, are you ready to go now? And they're like, yeah. Because once they're in the light, they can't be hijacked again into, serving darkness. So a big part of my work now is actually liberating demons from their dark service and sending them to the light. You know, I kind of see myself as kind of military intelligence and the spiritual realms to turn the loyalties of the foot soldiers. Yeah, that's
Well, that's
that's
commendable, and
side job.
it's quite a task you have, because I think over the centuries and the thousands of years, the millennia, this system has been perfected to feed on. I suppose for me, the demons come through the most with the narcissism, and the narcissism in society is rife because of the indoctrination, because of the low vibrational thoughts and fear mongering and all of that stuff. And then you have obviously the superstition from the church, and you have the dogma and from religion, and it's just a case of I think once we get to this level of being in our power, being in our sovereignty, we're all kind of doing this on a subconscious level anyway, because of the people that we interact with that come into our field. Maybe not quite as in depth and as great as you're doing it, because it sounds amazing. But yeah, I have little wins where I know there's a demon in that guy, but I've had an interaction with him and it's made him change tact a little bit, or he wasn't allowed to vent his narcissism because I closed him down, and it was just like, no, you need to just have some love, like you say, have a bit of love, and wow, hold them back.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's great. So so you are in Guatemala. So you have where you are are you in a village or a
I'm on the
town?
outskirts of a small town.
Okay.
Yeah. So the sort of area, the region that I live in is Lake Atitlan, which is a lake that's in the crater of a supervolcano.
Oh, wow.
And so there are quite a few towns around the edge of the lake, and we're ringed by this ring of mountains all the way around us, and three volcanoes that are on the edge of the supervolcano crater. And
Is
we're
there
right
anything
on the ring of
active under
fire.
there? Is it still
Um,
potential?
there's an active volcano very close to us called Fuego, which is constantly erupting, and we very occasionally hear rumbles from it here. I
Yeah.
don't know exactly how many miles away it is. I'd have to make a guess at maybe between 20 and 40 miles away.
Okay, okay.
But you can see it erupting if you're at certain points on
So,
the lake.
yeah.
Yeah, so we're very close, and we're right on the ring of fire. You know, so
Wow.
there's a line of volcanoes that goes all the way down through Central America, down into South America, and up into North America and round the whole Pacific. And we're on that line. We're directly on it. And it was one of the reasons that my guide said to me that I had to come here, was because the volcanoes are the most powerful land spirit to deal with evil and darkness in our world. And if you think about the Lord of the Rings, right? We all know the story of the Lord of the Rings, of taking the Ring of Power, which is a ring of evil. You know, the only way it can be destroyed is to throw it into the lava of the volcano of Mount Doom, right? And that's what I was told. I was told when I arrived here. I didn't know that before I came, but when I arrived here at the lake and I found myself in the presence of these magnificent, majestic and powerful land beings of volcanoes, they spoke to me and they said to me, you needed to be here because of the work that you're doing to counter evil, and we are here to protect you. And so I live what's essentially under a protective dome that's created by the mountains and the volcanoes and the
Wow.
lake itself, so that I can do this work, because, you know, I'm directly affecting the forces of evil. I'm constantly turning them to the light and sending them over. And they don't like that. They don't like it. So they're
Especially
constantly trying to find ways to breach in. Yeah.
especially the channel between obviously America and South America, because obviously
Yeah.
they like to travel and move
Of
around.
course, you know, there is a human trafficking and child trafficking route that is all the way through this part of the world. Absolutely. You know,
So
so on a very,
do you
go on.
find that people just find you, or are you having to kind of like try and reach out to the local community, or how's that going for you? I suppose
Well, so in
people are getting
terms of
to
my
know that you're
connection to
here.
in terms of my connection to the local people, you know, the local people here, the traditional, the indigenous population of Guatemala are 80% indigenous Mayan people. And within their spirituality, there's a mix of traditional Mayan indigenous shamanism and Catholicism. So the Spanish brought the Catholicism over, but it's a blend, and there's a lot of crossover actually, and both are practiced. In this town where I live, they are very strongly, they're a warrior tribe. The Sutahil people are, they never bent the knee to the Spanish, and they're very proud of that. They held off, they maintained their culture, they maintained their language, they maintained their spiritual practices, and they never crumbled when the Spanish came to try and oppress them, and that is still held within the pride of the community. That there are 20 different Mayan languages spoken just around the lake here. So, there are lots of smaller tribes within the Mayan people that come from different parts of Guatemala and Central America, and that also have slightly different languages, and they have different cultures. And some of them did bend to the Spanish, some of them were enslaved. And you can see that in the people. You can see they're kind of like this, whereas the Sutahil people they stand tall and proud. And they're very open, happy people, they're unoppressed. And you can see that just in the difference between the people on this side of the lake and the people on the other side of the lake. It's interesting to observe, So when I first got here, I just sat for 6 months. I was actually waiting to see what happened over the winter lockdown of 2020. I came here in October 2020.
Yeah.
When lockdown happened, I was like, whoa, that's my alarm bell, right? I'd known that something big was coming, and I knew that when I heard the alarm bell, I needed to leave the UK. I'd known that for a long time. I'd known that for at least 10, 15 years. So I was kind of waiting for the thing to happen. And 2020, global lockdown was the thing, right? So at that point, I'd already bought a boat in February 2020. I'd bought a boat here in Guatemala. Again, carrot on a stick. The universe just led me here. Guatemala was not on my map at all.
Sure.
It wasn't a place that I was planning on ever going, but I found this boat. I'd lived on boats for 20 years, already escaping the UK matrix onto the waterways. And I'd sold a boat in the UK. I'd split up from my partner, the father of my children, in 2019, late 2019. And in February 2020, I bought a sailing boat, a yacht that was in Guatemala, with a copper nickel hull. There's pretty much nothing else that would have ever got me to buy a boat on the other side of the world. But the thought of never having to do any hull maintenance was
that was excellent. Yeah.
And I've angle ground enough bottoms of boats and painted them enough times to know that I don't want to have to do that again.
I have to try and get it out of the water, and
oh man, just like years and years and years of it. So I found this copper nickel hulled boat in Guatemala, and I bought it on the internet. Just like, I did a lot of questioning from my guides. I was like, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And they were just like, what do you think? I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Anyway, so that's what brought me to Guatemala. I landed here in Guatemala City the day the world shut down, and I got here an hour too late because they just closed the border to UK citizens an hour before I landed. So I literally was on the border when the world shut down. And they took my passport off me in Guatemala City Airport. They kept me and a pile of other people as well who had just missed getting in under armed guard in the airport, and they put us all on the next plane out in the morning back to our countries of residence. So everyone was being repatriated back to their countries of residence, because obviously the people in charge knew that there was 3 to 6 months of full-on lockdown about to happen.
Well, they would have had that intelligence. Yeah.
We were being told, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, but everybody else actually knew that this was going to be a major thing, right? So they were sending everybody back to their countries of residence. I got sent back to the UK, and I had to sit there for the first lockdown, not being able to get to my apocalypse boat, the sailing boat that had a water maker on it and sails and everything else, couldn't get to it. There's the irony of the universe. I'd been prepping for the global apocalypse for 20 years.
And I missed it by an hour.
Yeah. And that's the universe having a good old laugh, saying, oh, you think you're all prepared? You think you've got your solar sorted out, you've got your wind turbines sorted out, you've got your water maker sorted out? No, we're not going to let you have it. So, they made me sit in the UK for 6 months watching what went on. watching the fact that sailors actually did pretty badly because they were either locked into countries or locked out of countries and couldn't get food. Yeah. And so I sat there watching a lot of sailing YouTube channels for 6 months through the first lockdown. And when Guatemala reopened its borders in September, October 2020, I was on one of the first planes out of the UK to come and see my boat that I hadn't even seen yet, and to get my children out of the country, because I was pretty sure that the UK were going to bring in a stronger, bigger lockdown for winter 2020, because obviously it's cold and flu season, and that would give perfect cover for much harsher restrictions. And I feared that they would bring in mandatory vaccination, which I was absolutely not prepared to tolerate for me or anybody else, especially not my children. So I left the UK and I sat in Guatemala. I went to the boat. The boat was not all it was cracked up to be, and it was way too hot on the coast for me. So we came up to the mountains where it was cooler. I put the boat up for sale. It sold within 24 hours. And I sat in the mountains here at Lake Atitlan and just watched what was happening from October 2020 through to sort of springtime 2021. And what I saw absolutely shocked me to my core. And I said, I'm not going back to the UK. Like, I can't put myself back in the position where I'm essentially consenting to a government to do experimental medical procedures on adults and children without consent. That's just not, I'm just not going to consent to that. So I stayed here and I started to look around me to this place that I'd kind of been led to. You know, we came up to the mountains because it was cooler, and also on the recommendation of a friend who said, oh, go up to Lake Atitlan. It's, you know, very chilled up there. It's cooler. You'll like it. It's nice. So we came up here kind of on a wing and a prayer, really without a plan. And me and my 3 children, who were 4, 6, and 8 at that point in time. And we landed here at the lake, and I looked around me. I watched, I just took it in. I observed the whole place for 6 months. And I thought to myself, wow, this is the perfect place to see out a global apocalypse, because it's food sovereign, it's water sovereign, the people are sovereign, they still have a backbone, they still know how to, you know, the men can muscle up the strength when they need to say no, you know, en masse as well. You know, if anything goes down here that's against the community, all the men rock up with machetes and they stop it, right? You know, and I think that unfortunately in Western cultures, there has been an intentional demasculation of men to disable their protector role, to kind of, you know, soften them up a bit. And what I saw here in Guatemala was the exact opposite. You know, the men were fierce. The men are just like, you're not fucking with us, machete in hand, and they sorted it out. You know, you know, the first week I got to Guatemala, the people were burning down Parliament, and at that point I thought, oh, I like this place. You know,
yeah, this is great. Yeah.
People burning down Parliament, actually. So I kind of, you know, that was my first week in Guatemala. And
that's
I
amazing.
just, yes, you know, it hit my core anarchistic self, and I was like, yes, I think I've come to the right place. So I watched how the people do things here, and it's still simple, basic living. The people are connected to the land. You know, there's no tractors. They're farming with hoes and machetes. That's it. They're farming on hillsides like this because it's all volcanic mountains. So everything that's grown is done by hand. The people are still very much connected to the earth. They are still very much connected to spirit in either their Catholic, you know, what I would consider to be slightly twisted spiritual path, or Mayan shamanism, or the blend of both. And then I was renting a house in the town, and the man who was the gardener of the land, there were 2 houses on this property, and he looked after the gardens, and his name is Pedro. And I didn't really know at that point in time that Pedro was anything more than a gardener. But then I went on this funny little journey where I sold my boat, and my guide said to me, put all the money into crypto. Now, I'd never invested in anything. I'd never traded anything. I'd never had stocks or shares or nothing like that, right? They just said to me, put all that money into crypto and do it now. So I was like, okay, then. So I did. And crypto went like that. I made quite a lot of money. And I ended up buying a house here on the bottom of the volcano with Bitcoin.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, when the universe wants certain things to happen, it just lays out the trail in front of you, and all you have to do is follow it, right?
Yeah.
That's what happened. It was like they just
I'm
gave
learning this.
yeah, they just basically gave me a house. You know, when you learn how to listen, they tell you what you need to do. And so they told me how to follow the trail, and they showed me the house, and I contacted the woman who owned it, and she had originally wanted paying in gold, but I didn't have any gold. So I said, well, what about digital gold? Will you accept Bitcoin? And she was like, yeah, all right then. And so, you know, in a very short amount of time, I just bought a house that I could never have bought at all 6 months previously. You know, it just wasn't on the market, on the cards, that I didn't have the money. It just wouldn't have happened. So this strange little funny kind of lashings of blessings happened, basically, and I ended up buying a house and a property here on the bottom of the volcano because I'd fallen in love with the volcano, and I'd had this conversation going with the volcanoes, and they were like, you need to stay here, and we're going to make that happen. So I was like, okay. And they made it happen, right? So at that point, I've asked Pedro, the gardener from the other property, if he would come and help me with the land, because I didn't know the plants here. I'm good with European plants. I know my herbs, I know my food, I know all those plants, but I didn't know the plants here. And so he said to me, yes, I'll come and help you. So he came, and he was working with me on the property, on the land, 6 days a week for the first year that I had it.
Wow.
And as we became better friends, you know, it turns out that he's at least third or fourth generation Mayan shaman. Of course he is, you know, because that's what happens when you're on this path, is those kind of things just happen, right? And so he's a plant and dream shaman. And so he and I began our journey really together in those realms.
Sure.
And he is still probably my closest Mayan friend here. And he's very much part of the family now. He's like a grandfather to my children.
Oh, that's very nice.
And I'm very close with his other family members as well. He has several children and grandchildren here too. So he has taught me about the Mayan ways, and he has taught me both the spiritual side of things, but also the political and social side of things. And then more recently, the shaman, the Mayan shaman here are called tatas. That's their name. The male shaman are called tatas, and the female shaman are called nanas. And I recently met one of my neighbors who I'd never met in the 2.5 years that I've lived in this house. I'd never met him, but he has a property 3 properties down from me, and he has a ceremonial fire pit on the beach next to, right near my property. So everything in Mayan shamanism is done through a fire ceremony. The fire is the central focal point, and all ceremonies are done through the fire. And so he has a fire pit on his property, and I'd seen lots of people coming and going and doing ceremonial work there, but I'd never met him until very, very recently. So literally a few weeks ago, I started up this conversation. He called me over. He introduced himself. We got chatting. It became clear that he was a shaman. They wear a red headscarf. That's how you can tell that the tatas and nanas are the shaman here, is they wear a red headscarf. And we got talking, and he invited me to go to a town fire ceremony that they have on a regular basis, which is all based around the Mayan calendar. So it's every 13 days, because the 13th day is the most powerful day in the Mayan calendar. And so I went for the first time about a week and a half ago. And basically, there were like 8 or 9 of the town's top shaman there, cooking up a lot of power in the fire. And I thought to myself, this is interesting. Okay, I'm being now, you know, the doors are opening to me into the inner sanctum of the town's spiritual
initiation.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, it's interesting for me because I've been here for nearly 4 years, coming up to 3.5 years. And my Spanish wasn't good enough to be able to learn the ways here. Now it is. And
Well done.
previously, my children were too small. Actually, they still needed a lot of care, and now they're older, and I can leave them for periods of time, and it's fine. So I kind of feel like I'm about to step into an apprenticeship into Mayan shamanism here. And I've bided my time. I've not sought it out. I've not looked for it because I knew it would find me when the time was right for me and for my family scenario and situation. So yeah, that's interesting for me that the doors have just opened. So I'm going to be going and sitting with the shaman of the town, cooking up the fire every 13 days, which is quite exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. Yeah, very cool. I think when you're talking about like, so yeah, you've been gifted this house and this manifestation. It's like we end up getting in our own way sometimes. I definitely have. I've got in my own way a lot because I've overthought it or I've and just not allowed things to actually flow. And that's the biggest lesson for me is allowing the flow of energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
think
it's
another I,
go on.
I think another big part of the equation of me being gifted a house was the fact that I did an intense pile of ancestral healing work in the previous few months, where I cleared patterns of financial oppression from the feminine lines,
Uh,
and
yeah.
so this flood of abundance flowed into my life that had essentially been prevented from flowing for probably at least a few hundred years, if not a few thousand years, um, through the female lineage. And as I cleared the patterns of oppression of the feminine from my ancestral lines, this absolute flood of money just poured in. So that was also quite a key component of how this house was gifted to me. Actually, was doing the work to heal the ancestors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very important. It's important for all of us to do that work with the ancestors and the inner work as well.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many lifetimes and imprints and like you say, contracts and all sorts of stuff going on that we've left in our wake of other lifetimes. It's just that deep, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that was also done intentionally. The knowledge of how to keep people sovereign and free was wiped out when the indigenous practitioners of our culture were all killed across a 300-year period in the Middle Ages,
Yeah.
and the witch trials basically decimated our cultural knowledge of all of those kind of practices. And so that's one of the things that I'm quite passionate about bringing back now is teaching all of these different techniques
Counts.
and practices around how to liberate ourselves,
Yeah.
because they were eradicated through the witch trials in Europe and parts of North America. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much discussion over his story because depending on if you believe that timeline, I mean, some of my research take me to believe the medieval period was completely made up.
Right.
Part of the indoctrination to stop to actually cut, especially in England, to cut the ancestry, to cut us out of our own ancestry. And it's quite ironic because the British Empire ruled the waves, it ruled the world at some stage. But what was the British Empire? Well, it was just the Roman Empire, just repackaged and relabeled. Everything in the system is owned by the Crown Corporation Limited at the Vatican. It is that simple. The system of commerce is worldwide and it is on land and it is on the sea. And that is the big difference, is the fact that you've moved to Guatemala and experiencing natural law in real time, in present moment. And actually, that is the purest sovereignty there is. It's the law of the land. And what you can do in that part of the world, you can't do in this part of the world because it's not the same law of the land.
Yeah.
It's the way of the trees, it's the way of the rocks, it's the way of the rivers, it's all of that. The law of the land is unique to each part of the land. We have we've just been disconnected in so many ways. And it's the knowledge of self first and foremost, and then the knowledge of the systems of man. because it is all man-made. Therefore, it is a fiction. Man created it. God didn't create the Bible. God didn't create all his documents. God didn't create all his systems. We did. So if we created them, they can be undone, they can be unbroken, and they can be repurposed for truly living in a sustainable, conscious way in tapping in with the land. So part of the vision I received in kind of 2015, 2016, when all of this was put on me at once, was the fact that part of their dark agenda for all these smart cities and everything else is they've kind of already done it. It's not that they're gonna do it. Everybody has a device, you know, everybody is already plugged in. You don't understand. You know, this great reset is all just about finishing the system of slavery. If we don't break it, and if we don't create these grounded I'm not going to use the word networks anymore, because when I say network, I think of business, I think of commerce. It is about community. And what is in that word? Which is communication, comms, and unity. And that is the only way that you can really live in a sovereign way, is in community. We've got so isolated in these boxes that we live in, all these houses that are close together, yet some of these communities are so broken. Nobody talks to each other. The only people that come together are either still in the church or they're part of some sports group. But there's no real kind of sense of belonging anymore. And that is all part of the conditioning and the breaking of the human spirit, in the fact that we're not allowed to congregate anywhere. Like I asked the children, I talked to some kids the other week. I always talk to, you know, like 15, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds. I like to get their perspective, because I like to see how they're experiencing their growing up. And it's like I was talking to this lovely young girl who started working in one of the shops where I am, who's 18, and she said, we're not allowed to congregate anywhere because the police turn up and move us on. It's antisocial to sit around with your mates and just chill out on the grass. What? You're in a park, you're not allowed to congregate any more than 5 people or whatever it is. What is that nonsense about? Like, you know,
Well, it's
in
the
case,
oldest trick
you'll
in the
hatch
book.
a plan
It's
because you're
divide and
anarchists.
conquer, isn't it?
Yes,
It's
of
divide
course.
and conquer.
Yeah.
You know, which the separation of people from each other is the easiest way to control people. And if you look back to the indigenous ways that people would congregate in their circles of elderhood, you know, the women had their moon lodges and the men had their sun lodges, and they would communicate and congregate together in those separate sex-based spaces. And I think that there's a quote from somebody, I can't remember who it was, that basically runs along the lines of, when they decided to eradicate the moon lodges, which is the place where women were allowed to communicate with each other about women's based things, female based things, you know, that was the end of the community, because women are very much the kind of communication glue within a community. And that's not to say that men don't do it either. Exactly. You know, it's part of the nurturing bond, and it's part of that right brain thing is communication, isn't it? Which is where women sit more strongly. And so communication is very much part of our biological advantage, I think. And even down to that thing of communicating with a baby when it's first born, you know, there are communication channels that aren't even verbal, that are body based and, circadian rhythm based and things like that, which are so much deeper than verbal communication. And it's psychic as well, you know, there's psychic communication between humans and animals and plants. All of that's been eradicated too. So I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, this is one of the other things that I observed when I came here. The way that the people run this town of San Pedro La Laguna, Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, is if ever there is a major issue that affects the people of the town, they all get together. Everybody gets together. They get together at the mayor's house, right? And they all congregate.
Wake him up.
And everybody, and I mean, the mayor isn't really the one who has the power. They're a bit of a puppet, really. They're the one that has the local government power. But people congregate at the mayor's house, and then they all have a big conversation. Everybody gets to talk if they want to. And then the town has a council of elders. And the council of elders are made up of the grandfathers and the grandmothers, male and female. They are known as the Consejo de Ancianos, which is the ancients, you know, and they are the ones that have the final word on everything. But they take into consideration the whole town's needs, desires, perspectives, and then they have what's essentially a citizen militia, which is like the indigenous police of the town. They're not the proper police, because there is a proper police as well, but they're the indigenous police, and they're called the Cocodes, and they carry out the wishes of the elders. So that's how things get done in this town. And, you know, the people allow there to be a municipal local government that runs the practical logistics of the town, right? And there is a police station, and there are police. There are national police, and then there are local police, and then there are tourist police as well. So they have 3 different layers of police.
Wow.
But if the police put a foot out of step, then straight away the people rise up, and that's what they call it. They call it the rising up of the people. The people rise up and they go and burn the police station down. Or you know, in extreme cases, they'll kill the policeman in question. So there have been incidents where a policeman has overstepped his jurisdiction, like they've gone and hurt a member of the local community because he's waving his gun around and shot somebody. And if, you know, in those kind of situations, the people rise up and they go and give him the death penalty, right? And yeah, you know, the local indigenous justice system, they call castigo Maya, which means Mayan punishment. And Mayan punishment ranges from banishment from the town, which is like the lowest level.
Yeah.
That's for things like theft, robberies, things like that, right? The next level of castigo Maya is whipping, public humiliation and whipping in the town square in front of everybody. And then they get progressively higher up in terms of physical violence. So then it's, you know, good kicking from the Cocodes. Up to the most extreme level, which is reserved for murderers and rapists, especially child rapists. They get gasoline poured on them and set on fire and burned to death.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, that's how they do things around here. And it means that there's very little crime. It means my children can safely play anywhere in the town and no one's going to touch them. It means that people are safe, you know, and there is an expectation of good behavior from everybody, that you don't mess about, because that's what you're going to get otherwise, you know. And they teach the children this from a young age. You know, I've watched whippings going on in the town square of a guy who was a local man, but he'd got into heroin. So he was going around committing robberies on the tourists and the foreigners, as well as the local people. And they marched him around the town barefoot with his hands tied behind his back. And then they knelt him down in the town square. They gave him an hour's worth of lecture that was all filmed and put on the local TV station. And then they whipped him. Yeah, then they whipped him. And, you know, the whole town was watching, and the little children were lined up, and the elder who was doing the whole kind of telling off was talking to the children and saying, look, this is what will happen if you go down this path of drugs. This is what you're going to turn into. This is what you can expect. You know, so it's like a town education, actually, is castigo Maya. It's not just punishment for the person who's done the wrong thing. It's a whole education for the people of the town. So that's how they do things here. And it's quite harsh to our kind of Western eye, I think. We look at that and we're like, oh, that's quite brutal. That's quite medieval. But you know what? It works. Because actually the government systems are corrupt here as well, and the police system is corrupt here as well. So the indigenous people have their own justice system, which predates the government, and it predates the police, and it predates, you know, all the other political institutions of power, and it's based on natural law and sacred law. Yeah.
Which is why their jurisdiction is higher, because they realize that the government. So basically in the world, in my understanding in studies of this, is the fact that when our ancestors started to build the system, as in the system of Babylon, because that is what the system is. When they started to build it, they realized that they could operate a two-tiered system. But in order to do that, in order to turn everything into commerce, you had to make everything commercial. So every country, part of the separation, part of the division, because there was no borderlines millennia ago, it was just one landmass. It was just terra firma. It is just the landmass of where we are. All of these countries have become these corporations. They're not the.
Sorry, my boy is just arrived.
Hey, he's all right.
Yes, you can eat bananas if you're hungry. Go downstairs, please. Go on, tell me.
Only wants to be alone in the bedroom. Ivy wants to be alone in the room.
Okay, you can all go to town and go and get yourself something. Okay. Go and tell Holly to organise it. I'm bribing my children to leave me alone.
5 minutes. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
All countries became corporate. They all became corporations, and all of these things like constitutions and different treaties and stuff, they all come under the different hierarchy of commerce. So every single country is registered at the Securities and Exchange Commission in America as a corporate entity, because they need that to trade. They need that to operate on the seas of commerce under Admiralty law. But what they haven't told us in our indoctrination is that our birth certificate is the thing that makes us a corporation. That is our what they say straw man. That is our person. That isn't us. And we've got because of because of all of it, we've got very much that is us. That is my name. That is who I am. But it isn't, because that is what you need to trade in commerce if you want to make money out of people and do business at the end of the day. This whole dead business corporate world, this legal world, is built on the ignorance of the children, because they cut us off from our ancestors. They took away all the sacred knowledge from the druids and the indigenous elders and leaders. And what we've been left with is this corporate upbringing from the Victorian times that teaches us to be moderately intelligent, to operate machines and do commerce and be good slaves, but not intelligent enough to challenge the status quo or to challenge the systems of governance in place. And I think for the world, especially in Europe right now with the farmers and everything, these institutions are starting to crumble, because what they've cleverly done over the decades is they've bored out all of these institutions, so that all that's left is a shop front. There is no wizard behind the curtain. There is no government, because it's just a piece of paper. This is just mind conditioning and mind control from the government, because in Latin that's what government means. It means mind control. And they've put this mind control on us, that this is the reality that we live in, when in fact it isn't at all. We're not taught.
It's more trickery. It's back to the trickery and deception, isn't it?
Yeah. We're tricked into being the debtor side of the trust, which is the trustee side of the trust, which means we're liable. So we literally pay for our own slavery, and that's how it works. Yeah. And then what they do is, with the birth certificates, they've bonded them. Well, a bond is what they do to slaves. You put slaves in a bond. So what they do is put it in a bond, they put it on a ship, and they trade it on the stock market for our whole life. And that's the GDP stuff. That's your worth of how much your energy you're going to earn. The sovereignty is starting to cut ties with everything that sucks your energy. And it starts with the bills. It starts with the council tax. I mean, in England, we're paying for a council tax where that money doesn't actually pay for any services. They're all private contracts that are tendered out, and that money gets sucked into some black hole. It doesn't even exist. This is why the roads are in such a state. This is why it's all in such a mess. But yeah, there's going to be a big shift, I think, in the next 2 or 3 years, because these systems are crumbling, because they're all built on deception and lies. They can't carry on. And in the true light and the true natural law way of living, that is the only way to live in this realm. if you're still into the false matrix, and also it's a case of getting your head around the business thing as well. They got us to make businesses because it keeps us busy. It doesn't allow us time to think. It doesn't allow us time to be. It doesn't allow us time to go within and actually receive the answers. We're too busy. And then you've got all of this online stuff, which just adds to it, doesn't it? It just takes you out of your body, takes you into the future, takes you back into the past. It's quite a perfect system, really.
Oh, for sure. You know, they've spent a long time trying to perfect it. I have a very good friend who, gosh, about 15, 20 years ago, he challenged the council tax thing. He owned a house, and he knew all of this stuff around, you know, natural law, common law, and admiralty law. And he refused to pay his council tax, and he was taken to court, and he fought it in court. You know, he presented his case very well. I actually went to the court case, and I watched it unfold, and they still sent him to prison for 6 months. So, you know, I watched that whole thing, and I thought to myself, wow, you know, even if legally the law is actually on your side, even if you know all of this stuff, they can still just bang you up. And at that point, I kind of
left it.
I moved away from that modus operandi of sovereignty, because I realized that if the systems of oppressive power and the state apparatus that can physically take your freedom away, which is the police, the courts, and the prisons, you know, if they're still going to do it anyway, even if the law's on your side, what are you going to do about it? You know, what are you going to do about it? Now, I do believe that times are different now. And I think that there has been a mass awakening, which is ongoing and continuing. And I would hope that if people en masse challenge these things now, that the end result might be a bit different. I would hope that that would happen. I guess I came to this natural law, common law stuff a bit early to the party, you know, and I saw my friend suffer. You know, I wrote letters to him in prison when he tried to do the right thing and still got trashed, you know.
Do you know his first mistake? And this is only through
turning up at court, probably.
Yeah, entering the lion's den.
Yeah.
A court is exactly what you play on.
Yes. No, I'm not writing anything. You go to town, you can have 20Q each, okay? No, ask your sister to do it.
A court is where you go to play business. That is, you know, a tennis court, a squash court.
Play games, yeah.
Commercial court. It is a business place. It isn't anything else. And what they're actually administering after 10 to 12 years of research is that whilst all these places represent a church or a bank, mainly a bank, the thing that they're actually doing is they're just enforcing contracts.
Yeah.
But if you go there as so if it's definitely a magistrate's court, you'll be summoned to court. Well, you can't summon a man or a woman to court because you only summon dead spirits. You can't summon the living. So on that premise, it's like so in the Roman in the court system, which is a lower form of government, it's a lower office of government. Government's the top level. The judiciary and the courts is actually under the government. So that's why they always follow rank, and they'll always do what the government tell them, really. This is why you'll find that ministers don't ever really get dragged over the coals, because they're all corporations operating in different trusts. Tony Blair should be, well, he should have been hanged for high treason, but he was a trust lawyer. He knows his law. He knows how to get out of it because he's part of the system, yeah?
Yeah.
The one thing to note is that I think with the common law is commercial law. So it follows natural law, but it isn't natural law. Common law is, especially in England, because obviously it's the original system, common law was the law of the land. And it's quite simple to live by. It's no harm, no loss, no injury, and no fraud. And under those 4 laws, God, wouldn't life be peaceful if you think about it? You don't need anything else. Just live by those 4 rules and everything's fine. But what you have under common law is, because it's commercial, it's the law of precedent. So what you can do with common law is you can use case law against the system, because it's already been adjudicated on. It's already been set in stone that, you know, Lord Coke versus whoever won this case because of this. And you can use that in your notices to repel the system. There is actually 12 presumptions on your person if you walk through that door. And those 12 presumptions basically say that you're trustee, you're a slave, you're a dead entity, you're going to be giving your trust up for pillaging, or your estate, basically. Yeah, and they're the 12 presumptions of the Roman court. So never go in there. I would never go in there. The only way I'd end up in a courtroom is if I was physically taken there by the police. And in that instance, I'm here by special appearance, and let's just get it rolling that I didn't stand up when you walked in, so I didn't give you jurisdiction. And you must be the public trustee and watch him spit teeth.
Well, you know, I'm pretty sure my friend did all of that. He was very on his whole legal thing, and he was taken there under duress.
Yeah.
So
it's more the point that they managed to get Joinder. They managed to get a contract on him. But yeah, they do it all the time. They railroad us all the time. So it is that. But it is falling apart because it just has to, because it's all built on lies. It's all built on deception of the real truth and justice of natural law.
I heard an interesting interview. This was probably, I don't know, about 2-3 years ago now, which was talking about how our galaxy is entering a part of the universe where a lot more light energy, actual photons, are hitting the galaxy. And, you know, the conversation unfolded that basically, you know, this is all measurable. The scientists can prove it exists. They know it's probably on the 26,000 year cycle that the Mayan calendar is based on, actually. And that they know that there are rises and falls of civilization that happen on these massive cycles. And that we are now entering this location in the universe. Our galaxy is entering the location where we're absolutely being flooded with light. So it's my belief that we really, you know, it's going to happen anyway, this transformation, and the forces of darkness or evil or whatever you want to call them, the slave masters, you know, they kind of know that their time is up, and they're trying to hold on as much as they can, and they're trying to take out as many as they can while they can. And, you know, I believe that that's part of why there is essentially what's a genocide going on, because understanding what I know now about the spiritual side of the weaponization of the dead against the living, if we go along that line, that they can essentially conscript a whole pile of souls to their dark agenda that's not based on 3D physical reality. It's not based on the physical location of our physical galaxy going through the physical universe, because it's multidimensional. If they can harvest a whole pile of souls and conscript them now before the fall of darkness, then they will have, you know, essentially got a whole pile of power in their multidimensional realms, in the non-physical realms. And so I believe that's why it's very important now to be doing the work to cross the dead over to the light. You know, I think this is a heist of souls, actually, and the taking out of so much life that we are witnessing through fake pandemics and wars and bioweapons of many, many, many kinds across the planet.
It's every angle, isn't it? It's every
angle. Yes, absolutely. It's from every direction. It's with every technology that can be created. They are trying to kill us off. And, you know, I believe that's so that they can do a massive heist of souls before we have so much light flooding in that the darkness just can't exist in this space anymore. You know,
we're all brought back into living in proper communities with natural law, natural justice, and actually respect for the elders,
absolutely,
respect for the planet, respect for everything else.
Definitely. And I think that probably how that unfolds in our physical world is the destruction and the crumbling of systems of oppression that have been there for a very long time. But with that destruction and crumbling will come a lot of chaos and a lot of death. You know, that's kind of what I see playing out, and what my guides have told me is going to be playing out as well. And we're witnessing that in real time now. It's incredibly sad, but I also think it's part of
it's just part of the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you think about the Mayan
transformation rebirth thing, isn't it?
So my knowledge of the Mayan calendar, not so much the Mayan, but the 26,500 odd year cycle, is the fact that this is the cycle of ages. And if you think about how old the planet potentially is, or the realm, I don't tend to say planet anymore, sorry, realm is the fact if it's millions of years old, then we've done this dance a fair few times.
Yeah.
Not just once. It's not just that we've been in this space in the universe and it's new. We've been here before. We've just gone away from it because of the cycles of time. There are four ages. They are 6,500 years each. And that's your cross of Christianity. There's your 4 different ages.
It's the medicine.
We are coming into the next golden age, and yes, there is going to be nowhere for the. Look what we built in the last golden age. We built some pyramids that we can't build today. We built some amazing buildings that we wouldn't even attempt to today because it would be too much money or whatever it is. There is just so much goodness coming, and this is just the last battle, really. And this is for me why I'm bringing this community together, is the fact that we just need to connect and start talking to each other. Far long have we been so disconnected in our working, and I get it. We have to be in different locations to have any effect, but it's a case of if we truly want to create these communities, we need some form of platform to communicate on and trade on, or whatever that shape or form is, you know. Commerce isn't going anywhere. It's been here for a long time, but it's a case of once the people are empowered and the community owns the business, you're all part of something and you're all benefiting from that one thing that you're creating or co-creating.
Absolutely. You know, and that's another thing that I witness on a day-to-day basis here in San Pedro. There is a thriving, bustling market in the town, and there is produce that comes in from outside, from other places. There's stuff that's imported and there's stuff that comes in from other parts of Guatemala. But there's a lot of stuff in the market that is grown by the people of the town and taken to the market. Like there's a lady that sells her chickens. There's a lady that's just selling limes. There's somebody else that's selling, you know, a small table's worth of stuff that she's harvested out of her garden that day. And when I asked the guy, who's actually a policeman, who goes around the market every day and collects the fee for the table, I said to him, you know, as a foreigner, I've been living here for 3.5 years. I have chickens that I'd like to sell in the market. Can I do that? Is that okay? And he said to me, yeah, sure. Anyone can come to the market. And I said, okay, how much would that cost me? And he said, well, it depends on the size of the table. I said, if I just had a basket of chickens, so, you know, like this sort of size basket of chickens to sell, he said to me, oh, that would be 10 quetzals. Sorry, no, 1 quetzal, 1 quetzal. Now, 1 quetzal is 10 pence.
Wow.
10 pence, right? So that's your fee to trade at the market. Now, you think about what it would cost you in the UK. Firstly, half the markets have gone because the corporations eradicated those. The last place I lived in the UK is Leeds, right? And Leeds still has a market, still has a bustling market. But it's expensive to trade there. You know, if you want a stall in Leeds Market, it's a lot of money. It's not 10p.
You've got a license. Where's your license?
Yeah, exactly. You know, so that whole taking the ability to trade on a very basic level out of the people's hands is another way that they have enslaved people. Because, you know, I see people, everybody grows food here, or everybody produces some form of sustenance, literally everybody. It's just normal. Everyone has a bit of land or a piece of garden, and everybody's growing limes, bananas, mangoes, something, papaya, you know.
I suppose what you get from that is the fact that they don't need to necessarily earn so much because they can just trade what they make with something that they want over there. So that's where your barter comes in, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, there's people sitting on their doorsteps selling mangoes everywhere. That's normal. Or there's people, they will have just harvested the peanuts out of the ground and they'll just have a basket of peanuts literally right next to their field at the side of the road. that's very normal here. You know, that basic barter and trade is still completely normal and is legal. That's the point. You know, nobody's telling them to move on. Nobody's saying you can't sell that here because you don't have a license. And that's another way that I witness, you know, people living freely here, is that they have the ability to trade. So it's not even the fact that commerce is bad. It's about how it's controlled and taken out of the hands of the people. And I see that the people still have that here, and it's normal. Everybody does it. And so if I think about that in, you know, overlaying that into the Western modern world, that's what needs to happen for people to be able to thrive again, because you don't need to work so hard. You don't need to earn so much money if you have to go to the shops to pay for the money, to pay for the food that costs extortionate amounts of money, because you can't just barter with your neighbors, you know, or trade on the street with your neighbors, or trade in the market with your neighbors. And that's why that kind of localism, the food sovereignty of local barter and trade, local food production and local barter and trade that is unhindered and unregulated, that's what's needed for people to be able to come back to the earth, and to be unslaved, disenslaved, freed, you know.
Yeah, because then everything else falls into place.
Exactly.
Especially when the community's concentrating on what they're doing. And like when I grew up in Cambridgeshire when I was a kid, and there were big cattle markets where we were, because they're all farmers, and it was great because it wasn't just the cattle, it was a proper big market, and you literally could get anything. Do you know where I can get this? Yeah, go and speak to Dave, go and speak to like, there's nothing that you can't achieve. So, but like, then funny enough, that cattle market was destroyed because Waitrose bought the land and kicked it all off. And now all that's left is this corporate giant Waitrose and nothing else, you know. So
you know, that was very intentionally done. That was absolutely intentionally done.
Let's bring the market into something where we control all of it.
A private entity. Yeah.
Anyway, I think
we've
had a very good interview, and it's been lovely to listen to some of your journey, and thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Hope to get you back at some point and see how this grows.
Let me know.
So thank
you. Lovely talking to you as well. Thank you.
Time.
Thank you for the opportunity to share what I've learned.
It's really lovely to listen, and finally, it's nice actually to have kind of a one-on-one space, because you get to be heard and you listen, and it's really lovely. So I hope I'm doing all right.
Well, thanks very much, Matthew. And I'd love to come back at some point when you would like to